everybody can kind of introduce themselves, and then we'll come back around again, and then you can kind of give kind of like a bit of an update on your take on the current situation. I've had quite a few questions that have come through that I'll run over. Does anyone feel kind of qualified to speak about furlough? Or
I'm happy to, Christian.
Yeah, it's all we've spoken about since Friday night, I'm afraid. I've heard about it before then.
I didn't want to lump anyone in it. It's the most difficult word, I think.
If anyone of the attendees is from HMRC that wants to share a little bit more detail, that would be lovely. Thanks very much.
I'll get them to feature up with that one as well. But I'll direct any questions about furlough to Liz and Martin, because there's quite a few about kind of statutory health care, like, you know, you've got to pay sick pay, and just generally, I think a little bit of an overview. I mean, even from me speaking to clients this week, there's been some people that think that they can part-time workers and then furlough for the other part. And there's other people who think that they can put people on, week off. And then some people who think they've got to do it for like a minimum of 3 months. So there's just lots of stuff out there that I don't think people are very
yeah, it's not particularly clear, and it's definitely something, because we'd originally kicked in with layoff and short time, but we sort of reading into the very brief statement on the HMRC's website, it's where there's no pay. So whether or not that qualifies, if the qualifying period is a month and they don't get paid within that month, because obviously they're using their terminology as a month in terms of £2,500. So they may be saying that the qualifying period is that you're not able to give them any work within the month. We really don't know yet on that one. I think the other cautionary measure we've said is it also refers to wage costs as opposed to salary on the website. So we've been cautious not to say to people it's 80% of their salary, because of course the 13.8% employers NI could also be part of the 80%.
I think that's the important point, is there's such a lot that's not clear yet. So I think the thing we need to say is what is absolutely clear versus things that are still to be confirmed, which I would expect that to be cleared this week.
Yeah.
I mean, I sat in on a government website, a government call yesterday with the CBI, and you know, it is pretty clear that they're not clear yet, and there'll be further communication out this week.
Well, that makes us feel better, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's best to be honest about that, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think one I've actually seen on LinkedIn a number of people asking the question, I don't know whether that was put to you as well, whether employees can still undertake work whilst they're being furloughed.
Unpaid, we've said, yeah.
Yes, and I think it's very, that's a really important point, because I think there seems to be this myth out there that people can continue to work whilst they're being furloughed. So,
I would say the government will pretty much exclude people who are trying to double dip. So you know,
that is certain. That is absolutely certain.
Yeah. I think you're either receiving furlough, volunteering, or if you're doing any other paid work, I guess they'll look down on that very differently, I'm sure.
Christian, I don't have control over. Okay.
I was only going to say the communication aspects of that are difficult, because you know, obviously you want to communicate with people who are at home to keep them in the loop and keep them engaged, etc. And of course they're saying that you can't do that unless it's just a blanket message. You can't have communication to and forth. So in other words, people can't email. As I understand it, I may be wrong, Liz will know better, but you can't send an email to someone and have a conversation because that's deemed as work, is it?
Let's just pause for a second, guys, if it's okay, just because I think we're getting into some interesting stuff, and I just want to make sure that we've all joined and we don't repeat it all in kind of 2 minutes time. Let's just give the guys 5 minutes to log in, and then we'll go from there. Have you got a baby in the house, Marco?
A baby in the house, but 2 floors down.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it's all safe there. And my wife is on duty at the moment, so looked after. Little one is asleep, so
very nice.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks.
Nice.
Okay. We've actually got Leah Queripel. I don't know if you guys know her. She's from Care UK. And she's actually going to join in on the call as well. I wasn't sure if she was going to be able to make it or not, but I think she's going to dial in more or less bang on 4. And she should be able to give some pretty interesting insight as well.
I can see people are putting questions online already, Christian, which is great.
Yeah. Liz, where are you seeing the questions? Hey, Wayne.
Hey.
At the bottom of the bar, on the bottom bar, Q&A.
Oh gosh, that's fine.
Yeah,
Question.
A furlough question.
Yeah.
Great.
the answer, I would say if it's paid, then no. But
yeah, agreed.
Yep.
How you doing, Wayne?
I'm very well. How are you?
You're in an office.
My office.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I just went to someone's office.
Randomly.
Yeah.
You wanted that really industrial looking lighting just to set things off, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can imagine. Oh, and Beth. Hi, Mike.
Hiya.
How you doing?
Hello. Oh. Hello.
We only live around the corner from each other and never see each other, we're hoping.
Well, appropriate in this day and age.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
How was your holiday?
Yeah, good, thank you. Very nice. Ages ago now, but yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Hey, Mike.
Hiya. Hello.
How are you?
Nice to see you.
I'm now, and you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It's like being a whirlwind 3 weeks.
Hi, Beth.
Oh, Beth. Hello, Beth.
Oops, I just had myself on mute. How are you?
Very good. Very good. You may want to there you go.
That's it.
So I think we're just waiting for Lee. I'll be 1 second. Give her a wee minute and then she'll come in. If you haven't done a Zoom call before, there's basically panelists and then attendees. So basically all of the attendees can see this split screen with the 9 of us on. The man to my left is Stuart. So he's going to host the kind of like the actual web itself in terms of like who the focus is going to be on, in terms of who's speaking. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction and overview. We'll move round the group and each one of you can introduce yourselves, and then we'll come back around the group for your take on the current situation, and then we can open up to questions. So I think that I'm kind of aiming to do about half an hour of kind of like discussion and then half an hour for kind of Q&A, if that's okay with everybody, and then we should be able to wrap up by about 5 o'clock. Hi Lee, how are you?
Hi, good, thank you. Sorry, slightly late.
No, that's fine, don't worry. It's kind of like all good to start. I'll just give it 1 more minute so that we're bang on 4. And let any other attendees who are struggling with IT actually log in.
It's been a bit of a nightmare actually, because I don't know if anyone else is experiencing it, but because of the fact that everyone is logging into the internet domestically, it's just been a bit of a nightmare. My signal just keeps disappearing. So please bear that in mind. It happened to me 3 times on a call yesterday, much to everyone's frustration.
Whereabouts are you based, Beth?
I live in London, southwest London. Yeah, I know. Not in the Outer Hebrides or anything.
Stop using your microwave, apparently. Not your internet. Yeah. No, I don't know if that's fake news or what. I did it today. My husband said, have you been
I read that.
Yeah, okay.
You heard it here first. There you go. There you go. Right, I think we can get underway now. Thank you all very much for taking the time to dial in. And it's a really challenging time for people and really support in any way that we can. I've got to say, I've been in recruitment for 18 years and I've never seen anything like this. It's pretty remarkable what's happening around the world at the moment. I just want to say a really massive thank you to the panel for taking part, who are all going to introduce themselves in a wee minute. It's our intention to do one of these panels each week and get different speakers to talk about the crisis from kind of their perspective and what they're doing to kind of combat it. Next week, we're going to do something around how to keep teams engaged, especially when working remotely and when they're out of the day-to-day business, and that's either for head office or for operations as well. For this panel discussion, I did think about setting some topics last week, which were redundant by Friday, and then I did some over the weekend, which were redundant by Monday. And then, so I just decided that for this one, it's probably best to have a bit of an open discussion about the forum, and then we can have some topics kind of moving forward. So we're just going to start off with everyone introducing themselves, and then a little bit about their own situation, and then we can open up to questions. So if we can maybe start off with Jane to get us going.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah, I was muted a minute ago. I'm Jane Sunley. I founded Purple Cube 18 plus years ago. 18 years reinventing ourselves, so we're no strangers to change, although this amount of change is probably fairly unusual for all of us, I would say. We work with a variety of businesses, 70% hospitality, 30% in all sorts of other disciplines, from a synagogue right now to Citibank. And we are people strategists, so we're not kind of at the nuts and bolts end of HR, we're more about the plan, being a great place to work, how to engage your people, communication, employer brand, that type of stuff. And then we also have a tech business that supports all of the good work we do and keeps it in place. So that's us. How's this affected us? Well, of course, everybody's business has dropped out at the bottom. But I'm remaining optimistic because A, we've all got time to do stuff, and B, we are all getting ready for coming out the other side, I guess. So what else can we do?
Perfect. Beth?
Great, hello. So my name's Beth Aarons. I'm the Global Director for Dorchester Collection Academy, and we're a learning academy that supports customer service and leadership. Very apt at this moment. The customer service is really coming to the fore, I'd say, albeit remotely, and indeed so is leadership. So it's absolutely critical, and unsurprisingly, at the moment, we're not doing much in the way of face-to-face training, but I'm pleased to say that we are keeping in contact with all of our clients, and they all seem very keen to continue, which is incredibly heartwarming considering the situation. And of course, that will mean that we'll be delayed, and when we do particular projects, but nonetheless, the fact that everybody still wants to press on is really wonderful to hear. So that's from me.
Great. Wayne?
Hi, I'm Wayne Morgan. I'm People and Development Consultant, and I run my own business called Clear Direction HR. In essence, I'm a non-exec HR director, working with businesses such as HIT Training, Power League, Park Dean Resorts, Catering Hospitality, and also work as an associate with the People Factor. I've been within leisure and hospitality the majority of my career, most recently as HR director for Bella and Cafe Rouge. And just to really echo what's been said so far, I mean, from my business perspective, a lot of the proactive work has, of course, stopped very abruptly and has been overtaken with the need to advise and support organisations in respect of the guidance set out by the government. So a real shift in the business that I do at the moment, but not unexpectedly based on the situation.
Perfect. And Mike?
So I'm Mike Williams. I'm the Global Chief HR Officer for Kelly Deli. Kelly Deli is a sushi kiosk franchise business that operates out of supermarkets, which is fortunate at this moment in time. We have businesses in 11 countries, so a lot of the last few weeks has been understanding and implementing and accessing the various initiatives that are provided by the governments in response to COVID, and working with the partners to help support them in other areas that they can access to keep their businesses going as well. We've seen a sales impact. It definitely has is impacting our business, but we are one of the fortunate ones that we will have a sales income, so we'll have cash flow, and in many cases we are still operating, but it has been challenging for all of the teams and all of the leaders, kind of getting to grips with the whole events and going at different speeds with different countries. Luckily, we're a virtual business as well, so we are quite tech savvy. It's been a saving grace with recent events.
Perfect. Lee?
So first of all, I apologise for not having my video on. I decided that it was very unsociable of me not to. But as you can see, I am literally working from home and not getting ready in the mornings for work. It is that busy. So we have 125 care homes, work for Care UK as HR director. We've got 10,000 employees, with over 7,000 of those that are carers. We're in a very different position, I think, to a lot of you, that our business is, the challenge that we have is we need more people to come and join us because we are looking after vulnerable adults. We're trying to support the NHS by taking their patients into our care homes where it's safe to, but we have team members that are going off sick as well, and then where they are working in homes where we have residents that may have symptoms, they continue to look after them until the carer gets those symptoms and cannot come into work any longer. So we've got a kind of an opposite situation to you, that we need more people to join us. Until last Friday, I had some very good conversations with people about leasing employees to come and work. As soon as the announcement came out that 80% of salary was going to be paid, that changed. So now we're working on a volunteering program with a number of businesses to see if we can get people to come in and spend time with our residents, both helping serve at meal times, sitting having chats with them, tea, coffee, etc., doing activities, because we've had to put a stop on relatives coming in to see their residents, and so they have no one coming to see them either. It's business as usual in the homes. When you see the social media, they're still having their gin and tonic evenings, they're still doing their bingo, playing the games, and it just feels like it's all madness out here and it's all absolutely fine there. But we will get to a point over the next few weeks, I think, that we'll have more and more go off sick, and we need to look after them. We need to make sure that we're safe to look after them. So I thought it was worth joining, to hear what's kind of going on with you guys, but also to see if there's anything that we can do to help us, so we can continue to help the NHS as well.
That's great. That's great. Liz?
Hi, so Liz Phillips. I've worked in hospitality most of my career as well, and I now run a consulting business, Liz Phillips HR. So that's mostly interim. So the last 3 years have been mostly interim work, but now focusing on consulting and working with the CIPD. So I'm supporting a number of small clients. So most of my work at the moment is providing guidance around this. And the biggest challenge seems to be trying to work out what's the status of these people now the furloughed scheme has been introduced. So we're sort of grappling with that with various clients and really trying to make that really clear about whether what's the terms and what's the status and what's the rules around it. So that's me.
Great. Marco?
I have also worked in the hospitality business pretty much all my life. I grew up, so to say, in the restaurant group, recruitment at TRG, which has obviously been heavily affected recently. I was then subsequently the HR director at Bill's Restaurants, at Leon Restaurants, and more recently Black Sheep Coffee. And about a month ago, I decided to set up my own consultancy. Now, speaking of timing, I literally had to reinvent myself within weeks of setting up my own business. So it's the companies that I currently work with, their priorities have shifted completely. However, personally, I'm in a fortunate position to to still have some consultancy work that carries on with companies who are looking into the future and for what comes after. So yeah, speaking of timing to set up your own business, is probably not ideal, but here we are, and when it will end, hopefully we'll come out stronger the other end.
Great. And Martyn, finally?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Yeah, Martyn Ball, good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Director of HR with Fraser's Hospitality. We operate a number of service departments, the Fraser brand, Capri brand in the UK particularly. We also operate Malmaison and Hotel de Van. We're in the final throes this week of just closing some of our properties. Obviously, some of the serviced apartments and the residences are a bit more tricky because they have longer staying guests and more permanent residents. But yeah, certainly since Friday evening, talking all things furlough really. So yeah, looking forward to some healthy discussion today. I'm sure there's many questions about it, which we've all got.
Perfect. I think everybody gave quite a good overview of kind of the company and kind of like what you guys do there. And I'm just very conscious of the fact that there's lots of questions opening up. So I think rather than kind of going, if there's any additional things that you want to add in through the session in terms of your company, then please do add it in. But I think that it's maybe more productive to kind of get into some of the questions. And if we could maybe just start with kind of like a bit of the discussion we were having before everyone else came in. Liz was giving a bit of an overview about furlough and some of her experience, which I think it might be useful for everyone to hear. Liz, do you just mind repeating yourself on that?
Yeah. So if I just think of the first queries that the clients that I had was prior to furlough being introduced. So people were grappling with working out how they were going to reduce labour and actually either end temporary contracts or fixed term contracts or make people redundant. And obviously then this great news came in about this job retention scheme, which is really designed to help keep those jobs open. So when all of this settles down, that work is to go back into. And I kind of joined a CBI call only yesterday, and I think it's fair to say that there is a lot of unanswered questions still. So what is absolutely definite is the scheme is there. It's for 3 months, effective from the 1st of March to the 31st of May. It is intended that people are not doing paid work either for the current employer or we don't know whether that means elsewhere at the moment. We're pretty confident they'll be able to do voluntary work, which I think people are starting to do already. And there's quite an opportunity to be able to unravel maybe some redundancy conversations that maybe has happened prior to this coming into place, because obviously it's only just come into place. So I think the advice I've been giving the clients that I'm working with is really to make sure that the status, the employment status of those people is really clear, whether they are furloughed employees or whether they are people on reduced hours or lay off or just taking unpaid holiday. So that clarity is the first priority, I think, for everyone to work their way through before you get into the finer details, which in some cases are just not even worked out yet and hopefully will have been worked out later this week.
Perfect. I've got one question from Dara at Red Carnation Hotel specifically, and he's been asking if, regarding the payment of sickness whilst furlough. Is that one of the details that's going to get worked out later on down the line?
The indication that I got yesterday is if when you're working out the status right now of whether someone's a furloughed employee and they're currently off sick, the fact they're currently not available for work already and they're on sick pay means that they would be on sick pay. But actually, if they became sick once they're on furlough, then they're on furlough. So that is seeking to be clarified, because at what point do you kind of make those decisions? It needs to be a bit more black and white, but at the moment it's about being available for work, and it's a bit like layoff, that people are laid off and effectively you want them back at a certain point. So if they're sick, they're not available. So
okay, fine. And then just coming over to Martyn, specifically, there's a question that we've got about payment of tronc. Well, individuals are on furlough as well. I don't think there's been anything specific that's been said about this yet, but what's your take on that?
We outsource our tronc to a tronc master, so essentially it would be for them. I mean, there are tronc masters which build up a reserve for what they would always describe as a rainy day. And obviously there is a potential to have a discussion with a tronc master to release some of that. Obviously that's their decision. In our instance, that's obviously a third party, which is a discussion we'll have for the April payroll. Yeah, I would say, obviously with no service charge coming in as a revenue, you could significantly expect, you should expect significant reduction in tronc payment, unless there is a reserve that the tronc master would agree to potentially pay out next month.
Perfect. Lee, how are you guys handling furlough from your side of things?
It doesn't apply to us. We are not looking to make any redundancies. We need all our people, and we're doing everything that we can to recruit both as volunteers and also as paid work. So we have no situations of needing it right now. In the future, potentially support centre, but equally we're diverting all resource onto recruitment to help us to screen people that are coming through, because we are getting more applications. And I think the important thing here is people might have an impression of what it's like within a care home, and it's not necessarily what you think. So we build 8 new care homes a year, invest a lot of money. We have coffee shops, we have cinema rooms. They are in affluent areas, so actually they are nice environments to work in. And we have kitchen areas, so typically people that work in kitchens in hospitality can come and be chefs, head chefs, etc. for us, and it is cooking with fresh food. So it is about trying to change people's mindset, that they can transfer those skills to us, but we have no redundancy programme in place that we don't need to use furlough right now.
And how quick can you get somebody's DBS clearance through so they can come and work with you? Yeah,
and I suppose historically that's been the challenge. I think we're in the new world right now, and there's a lot more flexibility. So we have been given priority as DBS applications. They will put ours through as quickly as possible. They've also said that we can do short DBS rather than the long DBS, but we are also able to do a risk assessment. If someone doesn't get their DBS back in time, we can do a risk assessment over the phone to make sure that we are still bringing people in that are safe within our homes. And then they've adapted the reference process as well. We've put processes in place in the last couple of years that we've been able to reduce the time to hire anyway, but the new things that are in place right now are going to help to reduce that and speed it up. But equally, we need to make sure we're bringing the right people in, so we won't do anything that puts any of our residents at risk either. But we will be getting people in that will be in public areas with the residents doing volunteers, etc. They won't be in their bedrooms with them, for example. So we're making it as safe as possible, but as quickly as possible.
Perfect. Mike?
Yeah, so furloughing is just one of the types we've been looking at across the different countries. I think what's important to remember is it is a variation to someone's terms and conditions. So there's a need to go through, albeit a short consultation period if possible, and that it's consulting to avoid redundancy. So it's important to remember that there are employment, unfair constructive dismissal or unlawful deduction of wages claims that could be made. And we're hoping that we'll get more definition on whether it can be applied to less work, so a month on or a month off, or a week on and a week off. So I know that Leon, I think, are switching shifts for in the stores where people will do a month on and a month off, but then you get people complaining that they'd rather stay at home and get 80% rather than go in and get a little bit more. So we're hoping to get clarity today on if it's not a permanent cessation of work, whether we can, if it's a temporary one, that people can come in and work and then stop and not work. We're hoping to get clarity on that because that's how we'd want to operate it.
Perfect. Wayne, do you have anything else to add on furlough, or do you think we've covered everything so far?
I think the only thing to add to that is that a lot of people want to bout and braces this, and to Liz's point, people want to know exactly what they can do to furlough people. I just say, let's be very careful about what we put down in writing at this time, because there is so much that we don't know. I would be concerned that employers potentially leave themselves open to having to make further changes to that communication in due course. So I am suggesting that we inform employees that it is our intention to furlough, and to give them some guidance around that. And where there isn't a right to lay off or right to short-term working in the contract, that they seek to gain agreement to that as soon as possible, so that once the guidelines come out, then businesses can action it much quicker.
Great. I want to move away from furlough just for a second. If any of the other panelists want to add anything else in with later questions, and please do so. I just want to make sure we cover a variety of topics. We've got a really good question around what advice the panel would give around mental and well-being of their teams during this time. Jane, do you want to pick that one up first?
We've been doing a lot of work on well-being for quite a long time now, but obviously it's come to the fore in the last few weeks. I wrote a few blogs last week, which I'll send to you later, which you can send out if you wish. But I think the thing is around making sure that people are supported, they've got someone to talk to, they can contact you. One of my questions about furlough, and I don't know the answer to this, is, you're not supposed to be doing any sort of work communication because it's deemed as you are working and therefore not furloughed. So that will be a massive concern for me, because I think some people are considerably displaced by having to sit at home. That we're used to dashing around restaurants and being with lots of people. And I suppose if you live on your own and you're in enforced isolation, it's probably a very difficult and stressful time, and therefore a threat to your mental health. So what employers should be doing is keeping in touch, making sure there's support networks, making sure that communication channels are open. And that's slightly difficult if people are furloughed. But I do think it is about putting yourself in the shoes of those people who are probably still panicking. My daughter's 23. She said she's got several mates who burst into tears every morning when they wake up and realise they can't go to work. Now, okay, maybe some are more resilient than others, but it is the employer's job, in my view, to support those people, really.
Absolutely. Marco?
Am I unmuted? Yes. I think on that note, I've spoken to a couple of companies as well. The one thing, furloughed or not, in my view, is in this situation, you probably can't communicate. And it's really important that people stay in touch with their employees. And of course, there's a fine line when it comes to furloughs. How intrusive are you going to be? But speaking from the company, from experience of the last few days and last week or so, the companies that I've spoken to, all of them have said that they have a significant need to communicate with their employees, so they stay in touch. Let's not forget that going to work isn't just ways and means to pay your bills for most people. It is also giving people a sense of belonging, which is now gone away. So this over communicating, hopefully companies have got those tools in place, so they don't need to do it in too much of an intrusive way via WhatsApp, on personal phones, etc. But through apps such as Yapster, etc., which really come in handy if you have this now, where you can have groups and support networks, Q&A sessions. So the companies that I've been speaking to in the last few days have all put that in place, and employees very much crave this staying in touch from a sense of belonging point of view.
Perfect. Then if we come back to Beth on the same question.
Yes, so really a good question, and I would echo what Marco said, but I also think it's really important to understand and appreciate that some of these employees are possibly in bed sits, and therefore they have limited opportunity to move around. Some of them may be in very small one-bedroom flats, and perhaps their partner is also working from home or is at home as well. And obviously, there are those people who are working, in very small family groups as well, where there may be children. Some of these people may be expected to continue to work from home. So I think there has to be an understanding from the employer to take into consideration not just the employees' mental health, but also the mental health and well-being of those people around them who may perhaps have either been furloughed, lost a job, because they may not necessarily be in this industry, but they may be in another industry altogether, and they too may have been affected. So there's a lot of emotional upheaval there. And then, of course, there's also the dealing with a young family, possibly elderly parents, and all the emotions that go around that. So whilst I completely agree, the communication channels need to be open, I think it's really important for leaders to be asking how the wider connections are, how their families are, how their children are, their parents, grandparents, and so forth. And by doing so, I think that really helps to create a human connection, which at this point is absolutely invaluable. And I really know that employees that I'm speaking to are appreciating it. I think it's also important to help people recognize that if they are working from home, for example, which many of us are now having to do, that they understand that that does not mean spending 8 hours a day on their laptop. They wouldn't have done that in the normal work environment, so they shouldn't be expected to do that at home either. And they need to be taking regular and frequent breaks, particularly if they're in a really small working environment. And there has to be give and take from the employer in terms of understanding when those people are able to communicate and when they're not. So just being mindful of the shared and limited shared spaces that people may be in at the moment, I think is really important.
Totally. Just coming back over to Liz, I've had a restaurant business who have actually moved to quite heavily on the delivery side of things, as a lot of companies are doing at the moment. And they've emailed with a question asking about employees who refuse to come to work because of the virus, and ask for the government grant to be submitted. And obviously they need key workers to obviously run the delivery side of their business. What options would they kind of have as a business, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. It's a tough one as well, because I think people have got to feel comfortable about coming into work, and that they feel safe to come into work, because they are going to be meeting other people, you know, even though you've got the 2 metre rule and everything, there's going to be some contact. So, and I think this is where the consultation with the employees comes into its fore around who's comfortable at coming in and who's not. Because when you try to force people that don't want to do things, then that makes it really, really quite tough. And also that you're trying to encourage a culture where people say how they feel. And just going back to the point about, you know, how some people might feel on reduced hours or coming into work while others are at home on 80% of their pay, that's going to feel and build resentment as well. So it's a really tough one. And I think it comes down to then working through and trying to share it out a bit. I mean, there's no evidence yet, but certainly one of the questions with the CBI yesterday was exactly this point around, you know, how do you try to share out the furlong and those that are working, those that are not, and could that be possible? So that request has been submitted, and we hope when the final detail comes out, that can be done, so you can share it out a little bit. And I think everyone's circumstances are going to be slightly different, everyone's concerns are going to be slightly different. And I'd reiterate what everyone said there about, you know, communication, keep communicating, because people are obviously very concerned. So so I don't think it's an easy answer, that, to be honest, but I wouldn't be forcing people that feel uncomfortable with it.
No, absolutely. Lee, as somebody who's obviously got a lot of operations open at the moment, have you encountered much of this situation yourself so far?
I think there's probably a couple of things here. One is actually our support centre. So I personally have got 25, nearly 30 people in recruitment that have always come into the office. They're recruiters that typically buzz off each other, spend a lot of time talking to each other. And they're now working from home, and they don't know how to do that. And there's lots of team members that are now working from home. So we've put together a document that kind of tells them what to do, how to set up space, take your breaks, you know, have your set hours. So we've got that for them, but we've also got for line managers who are not used to managing people remotely either. So again, we've set a document up which kind of talks to them about how to set up Zoom, how to set out a day and set an agenda out for their teams to help them with how to make sure that they get the most out of working from home, but also look after themselves as well. But also remembering we're in a time where there's going to be kids at home. So yes, you're going to be doing telephone interviewing, but there could be kids screaming in the background, which typically you wouldn't have. But it's the norm right now. So it's just helping them with what that looks like for them.
And
I think on the other side, just to add in terms of what everyone's talking about in terms of your team members, that's part of the reasons why we're trying to run this volunteer program, because actually people that are sat at home, they could think, actually, I'd like to get out for a couple of hours, be a key worker, come work in our homes. You're adding value to our residents, but it's also helping your guys to get out of their home for a few hours as well. And it kind of brings that for both sides of the party. And that's kind of volunteering, but also we can do paid work as well. But it all depends on obviously the furlough, what that means. Perfect.
And Mike, as somebody who's still got business open as well, how are you handling that situation?
So we took a deliberate decision right at the start to lead from a people first perspective. So we closed the offices before we were required to. We introduced home working before it was mandated. And then we have set up an engagement plan to keep people connected while they're working from home. So we have a yoga session on Friday. Teams have virtual breakfasts. My team and I had virtual drinks last night, which was quite good fun. We also have rolled out a number of e-learning modules around home working, around protecting your mental health, as well as managing mental health during that time. And other bits that we did at the start really was we paid for everyone's Netflix subscription. We paid for their delivery to try and encourage them to be more at home. It's been we've kind of like worked quite hard at building the support networks, because we also know that it's a difficult time and difficult decisions need to be made. So we've run our care strategy, our engagement strategy in parallel with other bits. So I think it's seen more authentically, and the teams have responded pretty incredibly, I've got to say.
Wow. And specifically from kind of a frontline perspective, have you had many managers or employees who haven't wanted to go to work because of the current situation?
Yeah, we have in some cases. Now, because we're a franchise business in the majority, the franchisees own that's their business. So they have had some of their teams that they've had to deal with. Obviously, because it's a franchise, they're not our employees. And then we've got some kiosk teams where people have said that they don't want to come in. We won't force them. We've made it clear that if people have underlying health conditions or are at risk, that they should speak to us, they should speak to the line manager, and that we will find ways to support them. So it is something that our teams are dealing with. It's not become significantly problematic because with a downshift in volume, it's kind of it's marrying up at the moment. But I agree, you can't and shouldn't force people unless you're fully aware of what their personal situations are, and no one can be.
Perfect. And then just coming on to back to Wayne, there's a question that Charlotte Ward from Leaf Hospitality's messaged through. I think she put it up in the chat as well, just regarding any communication so far on 0 hours workers, and if there's been anything about from government guidelines. Do you have any take on that, Wayne?
I mean, there hasn't been any guidelines. There's a few things that I'm hearing. One is that February's payroll would be taken to ascertain their average working hours, but looking at how we ordinarily would calculate average working hours for a 0-hour worker, we'd normally look at it over a 12-week period. So it is expected that there will be a mechanism to average that out. But as whether that's going to be a month or whether that's going to be 12 weeks. Now, We know that there's about to be some employment law changes, and the way in which we calculate holiday moving to 52 weeks as of the 6th of April. So there are a number of different dates that are potentially could be used to ascertain that average working hours. Well, I think we do know quite comfortably that if you have been in meaningful work within a period, 0 hour or not, then this scheme will apply.
Perfect. And anybody else from the panel on 0 hours contracts? Marco? Unmute Marco.
I'd second what Wayne has just said. It's the obvious solution in the absence of very clear guidelines is to take the average of 12 weeks for now, as you would with holiday. But again, as Wayne said, we're probably going to have to look at that again in a couple of weeks' time from the 6th of April. For 0 hour contracts. So I think there was also there were a couple of questions about can we potentially top up people's wages, or do you have to? As far as I'm concerned, if you're furloughed, you're furloughed, and the 80% that is it. So I think that was also a concern of some employers and employees as well. Could they get more?
I think it's a company decision if they want to offer more. That's for those organisations to decide.
Yeah.
Perfect. And just open question to the panel. We've got one person who's asking kind of like, with all of these changes which are going on, if they're allowed to delay payroll to await clarity from the government. Obviously that's due for a lot of people this Friday. Beth, any thoughts on that?
Sure. I think one of the things that we're perhaps, have I disappeared?
No, you're good. You're good.
That's good. That's good. One of the things that perhaps I think everyone's forgetting in all of this is that we have people here, and it's really concerning that we're actually talking about potentially delaying people's salaries. I'm pleased to say that Dorchester Collection has guaranteed the salaries of all of its employees across all of our hotels globally and our corporate office. And I think the one piece of certainty that those employers can do is to make sure that they are committed to supporting the payroll of their employees. I think that is going to make a massive difference to the long-term success of those employers, those businesses, when they come out of this. And I think also the wider perception of that business by the rest of society. Already I've seen companies listed on Twitter that individuals have stated quite categorically that they never want to have anything to do with again because of how they've treated their employees. And I'm sure in our own industry alone, we'll probably be aware of one or two of those without mentioning any names. So I really do urge employers to support their employees. Remember, we're all humans. We all have to pay for our shopping. We all have to look after our families. We all have bills to pay. And whilst we might be given some form of a holiday from some payments, there are still a number of those payments that everybody's expected to support. I also believe that those employers who are able to give generously to some of the other charities in our own hospitality network, I think is really important to do. So if people cannot volunteer in some way to give generously, not just of their time, but also financially, I think where they can would be great. And again, I know that Dorchester Collection has made a donation to hospitality action because of what's happening to some of those employees in our sector.
Can I just add to that, Christian? I think that if you didn't pay as the employment contracts are at the moment, you'd find yourself as an organisation in deep water for not paying. I don't think there'd be any excuse of, oh, I don't know details of the furlough, I think those details will become clearer. And if the April payroll is not paid and it's withheld, then I think companies are going to be in deep water over that.
Agreed.
There's a couple of questions which have come up about, now labelled you as a government representative on these things, but there's a couple of people asking about when you think there will be clarity on tronc payments, claim submissions, all of that kind of stuff. Do you think it'll be over the next couple of weeks, or do you think they'll have to wait longer? Liz?
So that for me, I really don't know. I would imagine that there's going to be much more guidance out by the end of this week. I'd be amazed if it's not. Whether it's specific about tronc, I really don't know. Perfect.
And just coming back over to Jane, we've had quite a few questions coming through around individuals who have been made offers for positions and have not yet started, and how people should deal with that situation. Any thoughts on that?
I think have a conversation, really, because everybody's different. I mean, I was talking to somebody about this morning. Some people are happy not to start. Some people are going to stay where they are because they want to sort it out. We've got a client at the moment who's very desperate to have a new person arrive, but actually have said to them, no, stay where you are, help sort that out first and then come to us. So I think it's about the individual. I mean, Liz and the others can tell you more about the legal aspects, but I think it's just about what's reasonable and what people really want to do. So treat the individual as an individual, I guess I'd say.
Perfect.
Sorry, can I just add one interesting point as well? Something that I've dealt with a few days ago, where some employers obviously were very, very quick off the mark to make employees redundant before we knew about furlough leave. And I've advised the company just this week about the right to appeal, and actually subsequently having reinstated employees who had been made redundant. And actually there was a genuine redundancy situation in the previous situation as of last week, whereas now the situation is looking rather different. And I think employers should really look at that really long and hard. What is the purpose of the redundancy? How genuine is the redundancy? Is the job gone forever? Or would furlough be an alternative? And is there a possibility to reinstate people through the furlough scheme to the job retention scheme, which I think is a really fantastic opportunity. And I know of a couple of cases where that's been the case. And I think employers should really bear that in mind, that just because they have made somebody redundant last week, that doesn't mean that they can't do the furlough.
Understood. There was a question that was brought up as well. If somebody had been made redundant in the last month, or in March, if they might still be able to apply for furlough, or for a company to put them on furlough. Is that possible, Marco?
Well, I mean, this is, it depends how long ago this was, but as I said, if you're still within an appeal process, and obviously the question is, as far as I'm concerned, you would reinstate as you would after a successful appeal, and you would furlough as from that reinstated date onwards.
Do you want me to, just to add to that, from some employment lawyers session that I had yesterday, they were saying that they believe it would be unfair dismissal if employers proceeded with redundancies without considering the furlough scheme.
Well, it depends on the situation, really, doesn't it? So there could genuinely be a redundancy that is genuine, where the job may be gone forever. However, I seriously think that in most cases, particularly in our industry, furlough will actually almost force employers to reinstate people.
Perfect. Martin, just coming over to you on that question of the individuals who've been offered positions but not yet started. Have you seen any of that within Malmaison?
Yeah, we've had a few people come forward. I mean, we've obviously had people that have left us, and obviously their employers have retracted job offers, and they've come back to us. I think it's really hard because the furlough scheme, is there a qualifying period? I know the government have said that it's from the 1st of March, but, is it saying that, well, you have to have been employed by an employer for a certain length of time? And I think that leaves us in a difficult situation. I've, myself sort of said, well, look, essentially, I think your new employer should, if they're talking about retracting the job offer, first of all, they need to pay you your notice, even though you haven't started. But essentially, Failing that, they could just put you straight into the furlough scheme. I mean, obviously, when the details are released, I mean, maybe we'll all be surprised, and coming back to me at that point, I'm sure we'd be able to do something. But it has come up, and I think the answers that you've had there are it's about having discussions with the people. We're all human. We don't want to see anybody miss out. It's a government payment. There's certainly people that will be in limbo, and between the old or the new employer, we should make an agreement where one or the other certainly steps up and makes sure they're part of the government scheme. It's a government payment. It's not costing either employer anything. Potentially some accrual of holiday, but beyond that, it's strange times. I think we just need to be human about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And from your understanding of furlongs so far, Martyn, is it legally possible for somebody to top up payments if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely. The government, I think they've quite rightly put out on the site that it's optional for the employees to top that up. So, and you might well see that, I guess, in some places, but certainly as the rules come out, I think more employers will make that decision. Perfect.
Wayne, just coming over to you quickly, I'll come over to you soon, Beth, but just regarding furlough, from your understanding, do employees accrue holiday while they're on furlough?
As we seem to start every answer, we don't know 100%. The guidance that I've certainly had from specific employment lawyers is that it is expected that as employees will continue to have access to their contractual benefits and also their continuous service, it would therefore assume that they will continue to accrue holiday through this time. But as with everything, less than a week ago, furlough wasn't even something that we used in UK employment law. So it's very easy to assume that they will, but I think everyone's paying for it at the moment.
Yeah, just to add on to Wayne's point there, because we took a number of safety measures before furlough announcing last week, and we'd obviously put in some enforced holiday of 1 week during the month of April. Because we're nervous about the rules of furlough, what we've said is we'll suspend that enforcement for the month of April, because I think Wayne's right that the reality is the government aren't going to stop you accessing your benefits, and if furlough was to continue beyond 3 months, 4 months, then you're talking about a huge accrual of holiday, which coming out of the pandemic, people, there'll be nobody available for work because everyone's on holiday all of a sudden. So I do believe that they probably will allow people to take holiday, because that's another question we've had quite a lot. If I take annual leave, will I get paid 100% of my pay if I'm on furlough? And obviously we don't know the answer, but my gut feeling would be that the government would encourage people to take annual leave, and I would hope that they'll be entitled to 100% of their salary during that holiday period. But who knows? This is unprecedented, uncharted waters really. But I can't imagine that the government will tell you to keep hold of it, because they don't know how long the retention scheme is going to be in place.
Right. Beth, coming over to you.
Thank you. So we've got properties in Italy and France, and those properties have been in a similar situation to the one that we're finding ourselves in the UK for obviously more weeks than we have been. And in both situations in both of those countries, the governments have introduced a similar scheme to the scheme that we have here in the UK. So I'm guessing that the UK has borrowed the suggestions and ideas from those locales, and we are topping up the salaries in both of those countries. So I just thought I'd mention that for those people on the call who may indeed have fellow countrymen out there who are working as part of their community as well.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. The thing that's come up quite a lot is about is the hot topic of 0 hours contractors, and what people's take on that is. Liz, do you have any comments on that?
I'm double unmuted. Am I unmuted now? Yeah.
Sure.
So the government are looking at possible similar schemes for contractors. So people that are self-employed, such as, I mean, there's people in construction, but also there may be self-employed people elsewhere that you have. And they're looking at whether they're going to be offering some kind of scheme for them. And there is an expectation that there will be something come out, but it's not been announced yet. With regards to 0 hours, I mean, 0 hours, yes, we're expecting those to be included. It's not confirmed yet. We're waiting for that clarity, but we are expecting 0 hours to be included, because 0 hours may well have, quite a lot of hours that go through over a length period of time. So then it comes back to then how's that averaged and how's that worked out, but we're expecting that. And the indications are for the self-employed that they'll probably look at the income over the last 3 years. So if people had just become self-employed, then they probably won't have enough history, but they'd be looking over a 3-year period for that. But again, this could change. This was just yesterday's conversation.
Perfect. Now, what I'm going to do now is just kind of like go around the group, because we've got about 10 minutes to go. And if we could just kind of like, and I guess specifically the people that we're hearing a lot from at the moment who really don't really know what to do are kind of like small SME entrepreneurs, standalone HR managers who don't have access to lots of resources. And I guess it's those organisations that we're seeing at the moment who really need support, or maybe panicking or struggling a little bit. So we just go around the group, starting with Jane, just in terms of any advice that you would kind of give, and what your recommendation would be. That would be great.
Yeah, I think, well, there are plenty of people on this panel that people can go to for advice. That's the first thing. I think the biggest thing for me is just think about people's well-being and what you can do, keep them busy. Mandarin Oriental had 1,000 people dial into a training webinar last week. So, there are things you can do to give people things to do and give them purpose and some stimulus. And I think also just encourage people to look for the silver linings. And I know that's really hard when you feel like screaming your head off, but there are silver linings, and we will come out of this stronger because people are learning to do things differently and learning to be more resilient and learning to deal with change, because, no change is ever going to freak anybody out again after this. So I think just keep pushing those positives and the fact we're all in this together, and just help each other really, and be kind and don't be horrible, and, make people redundant when you don't need to.
Good advice, Jane. Good advice. Beth?
I think something really along a similar line. It's the time to really show your kindness, your generous spirit, your humanity, and the hospitality industry that we're in is all about hospitality, which is supporting each other. And I think that's something that we all need to be doing in whichever way that is. I think one of the things that's brilliant is that having these sorts of conference calls is a great leveler. Children running around in the background and seeing people's houses and homes in a way that we haven't done before. And I think it's going to make us connect far better as human beings. And I think that's going to be a really positive that comes out of it. So keep that happening. Don't feel isolated. Go on to all these chat opportunities that there are out there, self-development opportunities, learn a language, do all the things that you've been telling yourself that you've never had the opportunity to do because you haven't had time. So now is the time. And I'm sure that we'll all come back out of this better and stronger as a result.
Coming on to Wayne.
There we go. I think one of the things I would say is as I mentioned at the beginning, non-exec HR director for HIT training, and we obviously provide a number of apprenticeships both within hospitality and the care sector, and we're continuing to work with learners. And I think that that's really important, that there's a real opportunity here for people to continue to grow and to develop, even though they're not going to work every day. So we're continuing to work with learners remotely, and I think that is really important to people's well-being and people's development. I think secondly, certainly for a number of smaller organisations, that we need to make sure that we keep elements of business as usual in respect of some of the changes in employment law. I think it's going to be really easy to forget that there are changes coming in on the 1st and the 6th of April. And as we stand today, nobody is saying that those changes won't take effect. So, be prepared for those. One of the things that I'm coming up a lot is smaller independent businesses where cash is becoming a real problem. Mm-hmm. They've closed the doors. We want to be kind. We want to look after people, but cash doesn't always enable us to do that in the way in which we would like. And I think it's about making sure we continue good communication with our teams, and we share with them our position, and we share with them what's possible and the reason why that is or isn't possible, to keep that dialogue going, because some organisations won't be able to meet the financial requirements of the 80% before the government reimburse, and may have to offer something in the middle, to both protect the employees but also protect the business and make sure there's a business to operate at the other end of this.
Perfect, thanks, Wayne. Mike, coming on to you.
My thoughts really are that to remember it's a social crisis, and it's a time for people to come together and support each other, and that as an organisation, everyone's going to get a bit of pain from this situation, and I think it's important to share that pain, as it were. So there'll be a lot of brewed up issues in the future if the leaders of the businesses don't do the right thing. We've already seen some examples of ill-advised videos and stuff like that of organisations that are going to be hugely brand damaging when we come out the other end. So at a time when we need to be looking after our people, we need to be doing the right thing, and otherwise I think it's going to come back to haunt a few businesses.
Yeah, I completely agree. Leah?
No.
There you go.
So I think I echo everything that everybody's said. I think use your network. I am absolutely amazed, really amazed by how everyone has come together, particularly on LinkedIn, how supportive everybody is to each other across different sectors and across competitors. And actually showing the people in your teams that you're in the same position as them as well. We're all in the same position as everybody.